Hey, how much of Ben's inheritance am I gonna get? My husband David blurts out, his words dripping with greed. My only family, my father, had just passed away suddenly, and we had barely finished the funeral. As I was drowning in grief, David didn't offer any comfort and nonchalantly started talking about money. My dad was a famous lawyer who often appeared in the media, and his earnings must have been quite substantial. When David and I first got married, we got along well and he never showed any desire for my father's status or wealth. But within a few months, he started acting strange. He stopped doing household chores, slacked off at work causing his performance reviews to drop, and went out drinking every night only to show up hungover at the office. Eventually, he became so self-indulgent that he had no qualms about being absent from work without notice. I suppose he had grown complacent, relying on my father's money. And now that my father had passed away, he finally revealed his true colors. His attitude, trampling on my loneliness and feelings of mourning for the deceased, filled me with a sadness that made me want to scream and cry, and an anger that welled up from the depths of my stomach at the same time. Lying on the bed, I told David without even making eye contact. There is no inheritance. I'm Mom's stepchild from long ago. I'm not a real family member, so I can't inherit anything. 0. David's face instantly turned pale.
You're lying, a stepchild? What the hell? You never told me that before,
he shouted. As I calmly explained, David suddenly let out a yell that reverberated throughout the room.
You deceived me. I was expecting an inheritance knowing your dad was a famous lawyer. I made a mistake marrying a plain-looking, middle-aged woman like you. I'm divorcing you right away.
He screamed angrily in a harsh tone and smashed everything on the table onto the floor. The pair of stuffed animals, the photo frame with our wedding photos, the mirror we bought on a trip, the mementos of our time together shattered one after another with loud crashes. Was this the true feelings of the David I had loved so much, the one I had shared so many fun times with when we first met? Overwhelmed by a mix of disappointment and disillusionment, I collapsed weakly on the spot. I couldn't let David see the smile I couldn't hold back. My name is Rala. I'm 36 years old and work at a cosmetics company. My husband's name is David. He's 5 years younger than me, and we met at a foreign language school we were attending at the time. Both David and I work in sales at different companies, and we were studying languages again to keep up with the recent globalization. My father is a famous lawyer who often appears in the media, known as the go-to attorney that everyone wants to consult with. Of course, his sales and assets seem to be quite substantial. We keep our family out of the media spotlight, so my existence isn't widely known to the public, but it still gets around to those around us. The neighbors, acquaintances, friends, and people at work often said various things about my father. With my father being wealthy, many people mistakenly assumed I was financially well off too and would approach me for money. By my 20s, I was already fed up with that situation. I had a few boyfriends, but in the end, everyone was after my father's assets. As soon as we got a little closer, they would say things like wanting me to introduce them to my father or assuming he would support us if we got married. They were all counting on my father's money, and each time I broke up with them. Everyone only cared about my father. No one truly saw me for who I am. David, who approached me persistently when I was emotionally unstable, always talked about foreign language lessons and everyday life. Even when I gave in to his enthusiastic invitations and went on a few dates, the topic of my father never came up, and he acted normal when we talked about each other's family. Maybe David didn't know about my father. David always seemed to genuinely enjoy talking with me. We would eat at affordable restaurants, go to theme parks together, and spend carefree days like a normal couple. I have so much fun just being with you, Rala.
Seeing you smile next to me makes me feel happy. I really respect how you never slack off in your work, hobbies, or self-improvement.
David said to me as we ate delivery pizza together in his room.
I want to keep enjoying lots of things together with you. If it's okay, will you be my girlfriend?
After slowly opening up to David through our dates, his words made my heart feel warm. This person truly sees me for who I am. With him, we can support each other in life. Tears welled up in my eyes and the pizza in my mouth suddenly tasted salty, yet somehow sweet.
Thank you. I'm so happy when I'm with you too, David. I'm looking forward to our future together,
I replied. David lovingly supported my back as tears streamed down my face. He never counted on my money to take me to fancy restaurants or eagerly wanted to visit my family's house as if appraising it. The ordinary happiness of eating simple home-cooked meals or delivery pizza in our small rooms had finally come to me too. Filled with a sense of security, I couldn't help but hug David. And so, we continued dating smoothly, but even during that time, David never showed any interest in my family's house. After about 3 years of a normal relationship, we decided to get engaged. If we were going to get married, we had to introduce each other to our parents. I was quite nervous about inviting David to my family's house. Since David didn't seem to know about my father, I was a little scared that he might be surprised and run away. When my father appeared and introduced himself to us as we waited in the living room, David was utterly shocked.
Wait, are you the lawyer who's on TV every week, the one everyone wants to consult with?
David asked in astonishment. My father let out a hearty laugh at David's surprised reaction.
Yes, I am that lawyer. You're the first person to date my daughter and make it this far without knowing. I'm quite surprised myself,
he said, still chuckling. David apologetically expressed his regret to my father, who was still laughing after saying that.
I'm sorry. I was being absent-minded. I didn't properly ask Rala either. The truth is, I haven't been taking her to nice places for our dates. I've been very rude to both Rala and you. I'm terribly sorry.
David continued to apologize. My father, still smiling, said to him,
It's all right. You're marrying my daughter, not me. My daughter's life is her own. You don't need to worry about me at all. The best thing is for you two to support each other in a life where you can both feel happiness.
My father's demeanor was calm yet dignified, making us feel the depth of his life experience and character as a lawyer who had handled various difficult cases and also worked extensively in the media. Moved by my father's words, David straightened his back, his eyes shining.
Yes. I may never be able to achieve as much as you. And I may be younger and unreliable, but I'll do my best to make Rala happy.
My father warmly watched over us. A few months later, we were able to hold our wedding ceremony and officially register our marriage without any issues. Some relatives remarked that the scale of the wedding was small for the daughter of a famous lawyer, but it was based on my and David's wish to have a lovely ceremony with just close family. We moved into an apartment to live together and began our married life as a couple. Even after getting married, we got along well and lived frugally together. To save money, we both quit the foreign language school, but instead, I started having more opportunities to interact with overseas clients at work, and now I'm acquiring foreign languages through practical experience. David seemed to end up staying the same, but he appeared to be working hard at his sales job as he always had. What kind of life would we lead together from now on? I wanted to travel together, and someday, I wanted to have children. I wanted us to steadily walk together towards a happy future. That's what I thought. But was I the only one who felt that way? A few months after our marriage, gradual changes started to appear in David's attitude. At first, he would help with household chores in the evenings and on days off, but recently, he won't even take care of himself, let alone do chores. Clothes left strewn about, dishes he ate from abandoned on the table. When he noticed we were out of daily necessities, he used to take the initiative to go buy them, but lately, he just roughly orders me around, saying things like,
"We're out of milk."
And what made me doubt my eyes the most was how his spending had become more extravagant. Before, he would invest in himself by going to foreign language school, but he wasn't the type to splurge on food or entertainment. Just as he had told my father, when we went out, he often chose affordable restaurants. That's why I was especially happy when he splurged a little for our anniversary. But now, even when it's not our anniversary, he casually buys expensive brand name watches and nonchalantly makes reservations at 3-star restaurants I've never even been to, saying he's going out drinking with friends. It was so egregious that I asked him,
"I understand wanting to splurge, but is our money situation okay?"
He brushed me off, saying things like,
"I'm married now, so I have to do at least this much to keep up appearances."
Even when I cautioned him,
"We need to increase our savings for when we have children in the future, so it's problematic if you splurge on your own too much."
He responded irresponsibly with,
"It'll be fine. We'll manage somehow."
Around the time I was fed up with David's carelessness, the bonus season arrived. There wasn't a big change in my bonus, and if anything, it had gone up a little, perhaps because my daily efforts were recognized. The problem was with David, the numbers on his bonus statement had decreased by a digit. Even David looked a bit dissatisfied about this, and when I asked, "It's been reduced to about 1/3 of last time," he said. I hadn't heard anything about the performance of David's company or industry significantly dropping. It was clear that the assessment was due to issues with David himself.
"Come to think of it, you've been going out drinking late into the night a lot recently. There were times when you went to work hungover from drinking too much, and you overslept enough to be late to the office a few times, right? Could it be that those things piled up and affected your work?"
I asked, choosing my words a bit carefully. It seemed that David's work ethic had become sloppy since we got married. From his daily attitude, his stance towards work naturally became apparent. I couldn't believe that David, who was constantly playing around and being late, could produce results at his company.
"Is that so? It seems like the company is having a tough time too. Won't the numbers go back to what they were before next time?"
David spoke as if it was someone else's problem, even though I was so worried. There was no sense at all that he would try to change his lifestyle, and despite his bonus being reduced so much, he didn't seem to have any intention of making up for it. Then one day, less than a few weeks after that incident, David was absent from work without notice. As usual, he had been out drinking late the night before, and must have come home in the middle of the night while I was fast asleep. No matter how many times I tried to wake him up the next morning, he wouldn't get up. "I don't care anymore," I said, leaving him behind as I headed to my own company. But in the end, David never woke up on his own and didn't show up at work after that. Moreover, it seemed he had continued sleeping without even contacting his company. When I came home and saw David still sleeping in the same state as that morning, I couldn't believe my eyes.
"Don't tell me you seriously skipped work without notice?"
I couldn't help raising my voice at his behavior, which was far too irresponsible for both a husband and a working adult. I couldn't wake up.
"The company called, so I took the day off,"
David muttered. Unbelievable. His workplace had gone out of their way to contact him, worried when he didn't show up at the scheduled time. He inconvenienced his company, didn't do his job, and on top of that, showed no sign of remorse. I felt a sense of despair towards David, who had turned into a good-for-nothing completely different from the man I married.
Do you understand what you've done? Your performance reviews are dropping, you're going to work sleep-deprived and hungover every day, and now you're skipping without notice? What are you going to do if you get fired over this?
I couldn't help crying out, deeply concerned about David's life and our future together. The next words out of David's mouth left me speechless.
Then we can just borrow money from Ben.
In that instant, everything went dark before my eyes. Since when did this man start counting on my father's wealth? I wondered in disbelief. He had promised my father that he would find happiness with me while supporting each other. He used to say he was happy just being with me and enjoyed our simple life together. I felt like a fool for believing I could find happiness with David. Now, in the end, David was only with me for the money too. He was no different from all the others in my past. Are human beings creatures who inevitably become blinded by wealth? Then was it a mistake to introduce him to my father before the wedding? Disappointment, regret, disillusionment, sadness, various emotions swirled within me. If things continue this way, I might have to consider divorce, I realized grimly. Even after that, David didn't change his attitude. Although he stopped skipping work without notice after apparently receiving a stern warning from his company, he never quit his flashy nighttime entertainment or wasteful spending. When he started showing an unbelievable level of frivolous spending, like impulsively buying expensive brand-name shoes and bags without much thought, I even felt a sense of dread thinking about what would become of David in the future. Anxious about my own life, several months ended up passing just like that. And then one day, my father suddenly passed away. It wasn't an accident or incident, but a sudden death from illness. Of course, my father's business associates and the media made a huge commotion, and those around him suddenly became very busy. Having lost my mother long ago and with no siblings, my father was my only family. Until the funeral was over, I was far too busy to even have time to cry, but when everything was finally done, a sense of loss and sadness washed over me. My father, who had single-handedly raised me while juggling his main job and media work, was always calm, wise, and the object of my utmost respect. Even when I felt like giving up during my college entrance exams or job hunting, my father's attitude of never shying away from effort and learning in anything encouraged me and helped me overcome those challenges. He was only 66 years old, far too young to pass away. As I was grieving alone in my room, David barged in without even knocking. I knew that David had barely helped with the funeral arrangements, idly fiddling with his smartphone in a corner the whole time while I was busy handling all the various preparations and correspondence. Having already given up on David after everything that had happened, I didn't even feel like scolding him in that moment. As I crouched by the bed, clinging to it and crying, David stood over me without even bothering to crouch down and meet my eyes.
"Hey, how much inheritance is there?"
he asked. "It all comes down to money in the end, I thought, disgusted. As I remained silent, not even bothering to respond to his words, David stepped closer and raised his voice.
"How much is there? With how much he earned, there must be a ton of money left, right? You're his only living relative, so you'll get the inheritance, yeah?"
He was grinning repulsively, even though his wife's father had just passed away. It seemed that now that my father was gone, David thought he had become a multimillionaire overnight. Lazing around without working while splurging extravagantly, that self-indulgent lifestyle dangled right in front of him, and his face looked so vulgar, as if he was about to start drooling. I even felt a sense of revulsion. Lying on the bed, I told David without even making eye contact.
"There is no inheritance."
David immediately shouted.
"That's impossible!" He died suddenly, so there's no way he used it all up.
That's not it. I'm the stepchild of my long-deceased mother. I'm not his real family, so I can't inherit anything. It's zero. Just as I told David now, I have no blood relation to the father I respected so much. This was part of the reason why my father never revealed his family to the media.
You're lying, a stepchild? What the hell? You never told me that before, he shouted.
It's true that he raised me until I became an adult and that we cherished each other, and since Mom passed away long ago, I just thought there was no need to specifically mention it. I had nothing more to say to David. Instead of telling him to get out, I sighed. Suddenly, David let out a yell loud enough to echo throughout the room.
You deceived me! Why do you think I've been sucking up to Ben all this time? Give me back these past few years!
What? For a moment, I thought my heart would stop. What did he just say? Before I could even ask, David flew into a rage and smashed everything on the table onto the floor. The pair of stuffed animals, the photo frame holding our wedding photos, the mirror we bought on a trip, the mementos of our time together shattered one after another with loud crashes.
You're an idiot, so you probably thought I was some prince who fell for you purely without knowing about Ben, right? It was all an act. There was someone in the same class as me at the foreign language school who recognized your face right away and secretly told me everything. They said there must be a ton of guys coming after you for Ben's money, so if I pretended not to know and put on a pure love act, you'd fall for it immediately.
I couldn't believe it. Unlike school or work, your identity isn't revealed at hobby classes, so I had let my guard down. Since no one had ever mentioned anything about me in the foreign language class, I truly believed that David had come to like me without knowing about my father. David had just accused me of deceiving him, but I was the one who had been deceived. David clicked his tongue loudly.
What are you gonna do about this? You've ruined my whole life plan. I desperately acted like a good guy for 3 years thinking I'd get my hands on that inheritance. Otherwise, who'd bother with a plain-looking, middle-aged woman like you?
As soon as he revealed his true colors, he started saying whatever he wanted. My disappointment had already reached its limit, and I didn't have the energy to strongly argue back. I just felt my heart grow cold.
I was planning to divorce you as soon as the inheritance came through without a hitch. I've been seeing someone for about a year now, so I was gonna marry her and build a nice house with that money to let her live in luxury.
After exposing his lies to me, he even confessed to cheating. I couldn't help but react to this. I raised my face, widened my eyes, and stared intently at David.
What did you just say? A year ago? Wasn't that around the time we decided to get married?
That's right. It was just about a year ago that I had accepted David's proposal and gone to report it to my father.
Don't tell me you cheated because our marriage was decided?
That's right. If I'm gonna be with someone, of course I want a young, pretty girl. There was someone I'd had my eye on for a while. But cute girls cost money, you know? I couldn't afford to date her on my salary. So I somehow managed to secure this marriage with you. What a perfect plan. David and his petty desires had been using both me and my father all along. When David went out drinking with his friends and colleagues, was he actually spending most of that time on dates with his mistress? My heart pounded loudly with anger. My fingertips grew hot and started to tremble. This was a real waste. If you don't have money, I have no use for you. I'm divorcing you right away. David spat out. I quietly told him, facing his direction. Of course. I'd refuse to be with someone who deceived us the whole time and even cheated.
Let's get divorced quickly. And since you cheated, I'll be seeking compensation too.
Perhaps triggered by the mention of monetary compensation, David, who had seemed to calm down after saying his piece, began to fly into a rage again.
Compensation? I should be the one getting that from you. I'm the one who was deceived this whole time. And do you even have any proof of cheating to show a lawyer? Photos? Recordings? You don't have anything, do you?
David taunted. Even as I felt my anger about to explode from his provocation, I tried my best to speak calmly.
You're right. It would be difficult to get compensation without evidence. Then I won't seek compensation. There's no inheritance, so we can't divide assets either. Just promise that from now on, you won't have anything to do with me or my family. That's enough.
David then said with emotionless eyes.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't ever want to be involved with you again either.
With just those words, he left the room, deliberately slamming the door hard to make a loud noise as he went. A few days later, after getting David to sign the divorce papers and the written oath he had mentioned the day before about never involving himself with me again, we got divorced. Having lost both my father and David in a matter of days, I returned to my family home feeling empty inside. My father's presence still lingered in the room he had been living in until recently, and I cried there once more. After that, I returned to work and began to get used to living alone in my family home, and a peaceful life gradually started to come back. Then, about 2 weeks later, my smartphone started ringing incessantly all day long. At work, I put it on silent mode and kept it in my locker to avoid disturbing others, but it was the same situation at home, so it was unbearably disruptive to my life. The caller was David every time. I had ignored it for several days, but it was so persistent that I decided to answer just once. If I listened to what he had to say one time, these persistent calls would probably stop. The moment I pressed the call button, David started yelling in a harsh tone from the other end of the line.
You! How dare you lie to me back then? There was an inheritance after all, wasn't there? Why didn't you give it to me?
His shouting was so unpleasant that I reflexively pulled the receiver away from my ear. The TV in my room happened to be showing the news, and I watched it. It was a story about how the recently deceased father's relatives had donated his sizable estate entirely to non-profit organizations. David had probably seen this news, learned that there actually was an inheritance, and was now in a rage. There was actually a small lie in the story about not having an inheritance I could inherit due to lack of blood relation. It was true that I was my mother's child from a previous marriage and had no blood relation to my father, but when my parents remarried, I was still in elementary school and they had legally adopted me. And my father, a popular lawyer, had prepared a will just in case something happened, which stated that I would inherit his entire estate. Of course, since a lawyer had drawn it up, it was legally airtight. When my father passed away, David was already living a lazy life of wastefulness. So I had kept quiet, thinking that if I revealed the existence of the inheritance, he would spend it all without working.
And what the hell is up with that amount? $2 million? With that money, you'd never have to worry about living expenses again. Why did you keep quiet about it? You idiot!
Since David and I were already divorced and he was now a stranger, there was no way for him to get his hands on my family's money. David seemed to have his blood boiling from the shock and frustration of losing his chance to get his hands on a large sum of money.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't want to give even a single cent to someone who obsesses over other people's money despite not even working hard himself,
I said firmly. David let out a pathetic sound from the other end of the line.
Did you really donate it all? Didn't you keep even a little for yourself?
I was actually impressed by how bad he was at giving up as I answered.
I really donated the entire amount, not even a cent left. Dad's money is no longer in our possession.
Then I heard a blatant tongue click from the other end of the receiver. You really are an idiot.
Why the hell would you donate it? If you had kept it for yourself, you could have had a good life. I made the right call divorcing a stupid woman like you.
With those parting words, David hung up the phone unilaterally. Finally feeling calm, I blocked David's number. After that, David apparently went out drinking every day, shocked that the inheritance he was counting on from his ex-wife's father was completely gone. Of course, his work attitude and performance at the company worsened even further. Moreover, the fact that he had married his ex-wife for the inheritance and divorced her as soon as her father passed away spread throughout the company, further lowering people's opinion of his character. Meanwhile, when I tried using social media to look for David's mistress, I quickly found her personal account. It seemed David had been quite generous with her, counting on my father's inheritance, but now that it was all gone, he couldn't even put on a good face for her anymore.
The guy I was dating got divorced, but lately he keeps saying he has no money, so the presents and dinners have completely stopped. I was dating him because I thought he'd let me live in luxury, but now I'm thinking of breaking up.
Read a post by his mistress. Seeing that, I held my aching head. If David was after my father's money, it seemed his mistress was after David's money. They were all just a bunch of greedy, classless jerks. I closed that page with a straight face, deciding never to look at it again. About 3 weeks after my last phone call with David, an unexpected visitor came to my company one day. An employee in charge of the reception called for me with a troubled look, so I followed them to the hallway where David was waiting, looking much more haggard than before. "What are you thinking, coming to my workplace?" I asked. David looked at me with a fawning gaze, laughing.
"I was thinking after that. When my bonus went down, yours went up, right? So even if you don't have Ben's inheritance, you must have your own savings, yeah?"
I was shocked, never expecting him to bring up my money.
"I've been taking out loans for shopping and using my card for bar tabs, so now my debt has piled up. At this rate, it's going to affect my life. I want you to help me out a little. Come on, please?"
David pleaded. Just when I thought he had finally given up on my father's inheritance, now he was coming to demand my savings. I felt so dizzy from his outrageous nerve that I nearly collapsed on the spot.
"Of course not,"
I declared.
"Every time you look at someone, it's money, money, money. I'm so sick of it. If you want money that badly, then work hard, save up, and make your own money."
Don't make such a scary face. You're really not cute at all.
Want me to tell you how much debt I'm in?
$20,000.
Even the woman I was going to marry dumped me recently, saying I'm too stingy. I've hit rock bottom. Can't you help me out a little?"
David persisted with a pathetic look on his face. Having lost both money and women, his sulking figure was simply pathetic and ugly.
"You selfishly counted on my family and racked up debt on your own, right? Deal with it yourself. You're really being a nuisance, so leave right now."
Hearing our raised voices, employees and security guards started gathering around us. Of course, the employees close to me knew about my father and had been invited to the wedding, so they recognized David's face. My boss, who had rushed over, had the security guards escort David out, resolving the situation peacefully for the moment. Afterwards, he talked with me at length and said he would make sure David couldn't get into the company again in the future. Then my boss got angry at David, saying,
I can't stand seeing someone who works so humbly and diligently suffering because of a nasty ex-husband.
While sympathizing with me, he even praised my sincere and competent work ethic and told me he would give me a good assessment next time. After that, David's lifestyle completely fell apart. He started being late and skipping work without notice repeatedly until he was finally fired from his company. Of course, David had no savings, so he quickly became unable to pay rent and living expenses. He was kicked out of his home and apparently ended up on the streets. Drinking too much, his health deteriorated and his appearance worsened. Of course, it was impossible for David to find another job as a full-time employee. He's somehow working a live-in part-time job and slowly paying off his debts with his meager wages. For years, he deceived one woman and flew into a rage when things didn't go his way. He couldn't manage himself properly at all, going with the easy flow and continuing to indulge himself. Such a self-centered and immature man is now being forced to endure a constricted lifestyle. Actually, there was still something I was hiding from David. The apartment that belonged to my father, where I'm living now, is in a prime location in the city and has considerable asset value. After living here for a while, I'm considering either finding a new home or selling this apartment if I ever find a new partner. And it's not a lie that I donated the inheritance, but it wasn't the entire amount as I told David. The will stated that I could use it as I liked, but that I should use a little for myself. My father seemed to have seen through the fact that I, who had long been interested in activities to save children around the world, would donate to organizations. I won't betray my precious father. That's why I decided to keep a little for myself, as per my father's will. $500,000, which is 1/4 of the inheritance, is in my account now. Of course, I won't use it for brand name goods to show off or for valueless entertainment. I want to use it carefully for my own future. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. A nurse nearby was surprised and hurried over to me. According to the nurse, it seems I had been in a car accident and had been unconscious for over 3 years. Furthermore, I was told by the nurse that my daughter, Kate, was in the middle of her wedding ceremony. My daughter getting married? I hadn't even heard she had a boyfriend 3 years ago, let alone that she was getting married. Had she grown up so much without me knowing? It was a feeling of happiness and loneliness that I couldn't quite describe as a parent. After a while, when the doctors had calmed down, my daughter rushed over in her wedding dress, having interrupted her ceremony. She must have really hurried. Though her makeup and dress were disheveled, my daughter looked beautiful as a bride. The man standing next to her must be her husband-to-be. He was wearing a tuxedo that matched my daughter's dress very well. Mom, I'm so glad. Tears flowed as my daughter grasped my hand, causing my own tears to well up. I'm so glad you woke up, Mary. It was then that I finally realized. This man was David, a colleague from my workplace. Unbeknownst to me, my daughter had married my colleague. You've become so wonderful. This moment of emotion was brief as the two began to whisper seriously to each other. What should we do? Our plan has. I heard such words. Plan? I repeated the words I heard. In place of my stunned daughter, David began to speak with a serious expression. Mary. Actually, we intended to do something at today's wedding. David then explained everything leading up to today's plan from the beginning. When I woke up, I was in an unfamiliar place. I couldn't immediately remember why I was here. But I knew it was a hospital. And then I could remember my name. My name is Mary. As I looked around, trying to remember what happened before I got here, I locked eyes with a nearby nurse. The nurse was surprised and rushed over to me. According to the nurse, It seems I had been in a car accident and had been unconscious for over 3 years. 3 years. I did a quick calculation of my age before losing consciousness. It seems I had merely slept and turned 52. The nurse who kindly spoke to me called another nurse, and then my primary doctor was called. Soon, the primary doctor came to my room to check on me. One nurse said,
"We'll contact your family,"
and left the room. Another nurse informed me that my daughter, Kate, was in the middle of her wedding ceremony. From the doctor's rush, I could tell that my waking up was almost a miracle. But what about this? Kate is getting married? I hadn't even heard she had a boyfriend 3 years ago, let alone that she was getting married. Had she grown up so much without me knowing? It was a mix of happiness and loneliness I couldn't quite describe as a parent. After confirming there was nothing wrong with me, the primary doctor said,
"I'm really glad you woke up,"
and showed me a smile before leaving the room. After the doctors had calmed down, Kate rushed over in her wedding dress. She must have really hurried. Though her makeup and dress were disheveled, Kate looked beautiful as a bride. I wished I could have seen her like this at the ceremony. The man standing next to her must be Kate's husband. He was wearing a tuxedo that matched Kate's dress very well. "Mom, I'm so glad." Tears flowed as Kate grasped my hand, causing my own tears to well up.
"I'm so glad you woke up, Mary."
It was then that I realized. This man was David, a colleague from my workplace. Unbeknownst to me, Kate had married my colleague. "You've become so wonderful." He looked different than he did 3 years ago, not just because of his outfit, but his face had matured. He had become a truly distinguished adult man. This moment of emotion was short-lived. The two began to whisper seriously to each other. After all, they had interrupted their important wedding ceremony for my sake. What should we do? Our plan has. I barely took in the content, but I heard those words. Plan? I repeated the words I heard. In place of my stunned daughter, David began to speak with a serious expression.
"Mary, actually, we intended to do something at today's wedding."
David revealed everything leading up to today's plan. The story goes back to before I had the accident. I met Tom, a year older than me, through business dealings with a client, and he pursued me passionately until we got married. We were blessed with our precious daughter, Kate, who turned 24 this year, making us a family of 3. However, I hadn't always felt happy. My husband hardly did any housework at all. I accepted his proposal because, before we were married, he seemed like someone who would cherish me and not be like this. "It's nice for you. You earn more than I do." He changed after we got married. He knew before we got married that I earned more, and he said,
"Let's both work and help each other out with the housework after we get married."
But once we were married, he constantly complained about me earning more. Feeling inferior because he was outdone by me in both work and housework, my husband probably wanted to assert his dominance through words. At home, he began to nag me persistently.
"I wish you would stop saying things like that."
At first, I tried to argue back and discuss things. However, no matter what I said, my husband would deny it and not accept anything I said. It was impossible to have a discussion with him. Gradually, I found arguing back tiresome and decided to just ignore everything. No matter what was said, I didn't argue back or show any sign of being upset. I thought he might stop if I didn't react, but instead, my silence seemed to give him free rein to say whatever he wanted. Yet knowing it was futile to argue back, I kept enduring, not letting his words disturb me. Then one day, I discovered I was pregnant. I was genuinely happy about being blessed with a child.
"I want 1 boy and 1 girl."
My husband used to say with a smile before we got married, and I thought he loved children and would help with parenting. So, I believed that once our child was born, my husband would change. But the reality was different. Even after Kate was born, his attitude didn't change, and I ended up managing work, housework, and now childcare, all by myself. However, divorce was not an option for me. Fortunately, my husband never became violent, nor was he ever verbally abusive towards Kate. And more than anything, I didn't want Kate to grow up without a father. Everything was for Kate's sake. With that single-minded purpose, I endured whatever my husband said. I wonder if my husband forgot about wanting 2 children. Since Kate's birth, my husband and I hadn't even slept in the same bed. Kate seemed to understand my feelings and grew up well-adjusted. Eventually, she graduated from college, found a job, and moved out. I was happy to see Kate become a respectable adult, but that's when the tragedy started. As soon as it was just my husband and me at home, his nagging intensified more than before. His overtime increased, and he spent less time at home, but his words towards me became more extreme. Due to stress and fatigue, I ended up crashing into a pole while driving and have been unconscious for 3 years. When Kate was informed about the accident, she left work early and rushed over. The surgery was successful, but the doctor said,
"It's uncertain when she'll wake up, and it wouldn't be surprising if she passed away at any time."
But the doctor said. Hearing that, Kate decided to take care of me and has been doing so ever since. As for my husband, he left all the caregiving to Kate and lived freely. Somehow, my husband maintained a good appearance outside, so he received courteous treatment from colleagues and neighbors who heard about my condition. It's always been like this. He's pleasant to everyone but me, liked by women in the neighborhood, and, from what I hear about his position and relationships at work, he wasn't regarded poorly. So, I was completely fooled by him before we got married. The way he acted after we got married was the real him. He wanted to be a good person outside, but at home, he wanted someone in a weaker position than himself, like a wife, to dominate. However, since I managed both housework and childcare, and eventually outperformed him in work, he probably felt the need to assert his dominance by saying whatever he wanted every day. Apart from my husband and Kate, the only other people who came to visit me in the hospital were my best friend Jane and my colleague David. Kate knows Jane is my best friend. I've had Jane over a few times, and during those visits, she met Kate. David came to visit 2 days after I was hospitalized, and that's when he and Kate had their first one-on-one conversation.
"I'll come to visit now and then. Don't overdo it."
Jane and David were considerate towards Kate. Indeed, Jane made sure to visit once every month or 2, and Kate was grateful for that. Kate and David met when he came to visit me in the hospital. David had joined my company as a new graduate. Since we graduated from the same university, I ended up looking out for him quite a bit. I remember being pleased to take care of him as if he were a son, since he was 2 years older than my daughter. I've resolved a few work-related issues for David, and he seemed to be grateful for that. Wanting to do something for me while I was hospitalized, he frequently showed up to offer support to Kate as well. Through my hospitalization, Kate began to realize that her father's attitude towards me was strange. As Kate grew closer to David, she started to confide in him about her uncooperative father, which led to their relationship becoming more intimate and eventually turning into a romance. Kate had repeatedly urged her father to visit me, but he kept refusing, citing work as the reason. In reality, my husband only visited me once the day after the accident occurred. He couldn't be reached on the day of the accident and only showed up at the hospital for 30 minutes the next day before leaving quickly. He seemed sad that day, but I'm sure that was just an act to appear sympathetic to others. I know him. Given his past behavior, there's no way my husband would genuinely worry about me being in a coma. He's always been good at presenting a favorable image to others. Then one day, when Kate went to pick up some of my belongings from our house, she witnessed something shocking. This discovery led to the plan they intended to carry out at the wedding. Unbelievably, my husband and Jane were having an affair at our home. That day, he had told her he was at work. All his claims of being at work were lies. Taking advantage of my coma, he had started bringing Jane into our home. Kate left without letting them know she was there and immediately consulted with David.
Let's gather evidence of the affair for now.
David calmed Kate down and advised her to take a rational approach. They began to quietly gather evidence of the affair without letting my husband or Jane know. It turned out that my husband and Jane had been having an affair even before I fell into a coma. And on the day of my accident, he was with Jane. Now it makes sense why my husband's overtime increased after Kate started her job. It was because of the affair. But I had stopped loving my husband enough to suspect him of having an affair. After I was gone, it seemed they planned to remarry using the inheritance from my parents that would go to my husband. Among the evidence of their affair was a brochure for a honeymoon trip. I had heard that they were waiting for the inheritance from my parents, who had passed away years ago and left a considerable sum to go to my husband. When I discussed it with him,
"We'll save this for an emergency,"
I had said. If I were gone, all the inheritance would go to my husband. The thought of him using that for his remarriage to Jane was horrifying. Kate and David had gathered enough evidence of the affair, employing a detective as well. 2 years after I fell into a coma.
Considering everything with Mary and David, I know it's been tough. But I'll always be here to support you. Marry me.
David proposed to Kate, and they got engaged. Simultaneously, David came up with a plan.
Let's show everyone the evidence of Tom and Jane's affair at our wedding.
Kate agreed to the plan, and they began preparing for the wedding. Unaware of such preparations, my husband and Jane continued to enjoy their affair, thinking I was none the wiser. Jane still visited me regularly, for reasons unknown. Was she looking at my unconscious face? Praying for me to disappear? It's distressing to think about. Kate didn't know how to act around Jane, who kept visiting despite her affair with Kate's father. It's bizarre to act normal around the woman having an affair with your father. Every time Kate saw Jane, she was reminded of her being with her father at home and felt the urge to yell at her. Yet, to ensure the success of their plan, she maintained her composure, pretending not to know anything. Apparently, Jane visited while David was there. That was the first time David and Jane met face to face. They only had a trivial conversation. Jane expressed concern for Kate and David, talked about me, and spent about 30 minutes chatting in the room. The atmosphere wasn't bad at all, sometimes even filled with laughter.
That woman is the mistress,
David murmured after Jane had left. I think even from Jane's demeanor that day, David couldn't possibly imagine she was involved in an affair. Afterward, Kate and David discussed Jane. Jane was the same age as me but looked younger for her age. She dressed nicely, wore her makeup well, and took great care of her figure. A stark contrast to me, who had been too busy to care much for appearances. Not that I looked terrible, of course. I hadn't heard much about Jane's love life before. She married around the same time as me but ended up divorcing within 5 years. Her ex-husband didn't seem like a bad person. But I thought it wasn't good to delve too deeply into her divorce, so I never asked. And I had no idea about her romantic life afterward. However, Jane seemed to have a fulfilling work and social life, so she didn't appear eager to remarry. The fact that she would have an affair was shocking. Or perhaps her past romantic experiences had led to this. I can't and don't want to understand the mindset of someone who has an affair, but Jane and I had been close friends since college, for decades. It's a shame she was the only person I could call a best friend. The wedding preparations for the two of them were coming to a climax. If we play this at the end of the reception. Kate, looking at the finished tape, got a big nod from David. Their plan was to show a video of my husband's affair at the end of the wedding. Both my husband and Jane were invited to the ceremony and indeed attended that day. All that was left was to play the video. Kate and David imagined the faces of Jane and my husband when the video was shown. Neither my husband nor Jane could have imagined that their affair would be exposed to all the guests at the end of the wedding. This would be a great humiliation for both of them. Now, they just had to wait for the wedding day. The plan had progressed smoothly so far. The wedding began as scheduled, and the reception was nearing its end without any issues. Just before the video was to be played, the hospital called to say I had woken up. The wedding was immediately interrupted. Kate and David, still in their wedding attire, hopped into a taxi and came to the hospital, leading to the current moment. "This is everything that happened while you were unconscious, Mary." David finished telling the story. "My husband had an affair with Jane." After my whisper, no one spoke. In the silent room, I was left to ponder alone. Hearing the story wasn't enough for me to fully believe it. That my husband, not content with just nagging me, would have an affair with my best friend. How low could a person sink? I might have been oblivious, but of all people, the mistress was my friend Jane. If that's true, they're both insane. Having an affair right under my nose and enjoying it while I was unconscious is unforgivable. Unable to speak further, the door to the hospital room eventually opened. My husband and Jane appeared. "I'm so glad you woke up." "Truly." Jane was the first to rush to my side. My husband followed, feigning concern. Since Kate, David, and now a nurse who had just arrived were present, they were probably putting on a show. After the nurse, who accompanied my husband and Jane, left, I briefly greeted her and then turned to look at my husband and Jane. Somehow, I was able to think about my husband and Jane calmly. They were dressed too nicely, probably still in their reception attire. But considering Kate and David came from the same place, they took too long to arrive. 30 minutes too long. What could that mean? Could it be that they came together, regretting my awakening and taking their time? That thought disgusted me. Contemplating how they must have wished for my absence, I shook off Jane's hand.
"You! How dare you treat a friend who came all the way here like that?"
Jane, taken aback, said nothing. My husband stepped forward to defend her. Was this a woman's intuition? Seeing their interaction convinced me of their affair's reality.
"Kate, David, please kick these two out. Please."
Jane looked confused, unable to grasp the situation, while my husband was just showing his anger. To them, I added more.
"I've heard about your affair. I've put up with everything until now, but it's over. We're getting a divorce. And Jane, you are no longer a friend or anything to me. Just a stranger. Please never show up in front of me again."
Upon hearing these words, Jane glared back at me, revealing her true nature before my husband could react.
"You should have just left the money. You're just in the way of our happiness."
Jane approached me with an expression I had never seen before. Kate stopped her, and David restrained my husband.
"You really think you'll be okay without me? You'll regret this."
Even now, my husband tried to assert his dominance with his words. He forgot Kate and David were there and lashed out at me as usual.
"Yes. I'm better off without you."
I looked at him coldly. His face turned red rapidly. Gradually, both my husband and Jane's voices grew louder and harsher until the nurses came to see what was happening. The nurse tried to calm down Jane and my husband, saying,
"This is a hospital, please."
But they wouldn't quiet down. Eventually, Jane and my husband were kicked out of the hospital.
I never imagined confronting them about the affair in such a way.
Once the commotion settled, I finally took a breath in the quiet room.
Kate, David, thank you so much.
I would like to express my gratitude to the two of them, which I haven't been able to express yet. I hadn't yet expressed my gratitude to them for looking after me during the 3 years I was unconscious and for thoroughly investigating my husband and Jane's affair. I couldn't thank them enough. Kate and David exchanged glances before David knelt before me.
Mary, I apologize for the late introduction. Please allow me to marry Kate. I promise to make her happy,
David said nervously. He was just a cute colleague 3 years ago, but he had supported me and Kate throughout these years. I had no intention of denying their marriage.
Of course. David, I trust you with my daughter. Be happy together.
David smiled in relief at my response. Soon after, I was discharged from the hospital. Many things happened until my discharge, and Kate and David kept me updated. First, their wedding was cancelled, and they sent apologies to all invitees, including the evidence of the affair planned for the last part of the wedding. Though the original plan and method differed, all invitees eventually learned of the affair. My husband's company had dealings with the hospital I was admitted to, and the hospital incident became known to his company, revealing his affair. His standing at work became significantly uncomfortable. Though he wasn't fired, at least. Jane, too, faced severe backlash, known as the worst woman for stealing a friend's husband and causing her to fall into a coma. Though the story might be exaggerated, such punishment seemed just. I divorced him and got compensation from both. Our house was in my name, so I sold it, leaving my ex-husband homeless. The compensation led to financial difficulties for him. I found a new place for myself and lived comfortably. I planned to return to work after the accident, but the aftermath made it impossible. However, I had enough from the compensation, condolence money, and savings to live comfortably. I decided to enjoy life and pick up new hobbies, making up for the lost 3 years. I heard my ex-husband and Jane broke up after a huge fight. Jane was apparently after money. And my ex-husband had pretended to earn more than he did. I had never bothered to talk about this with Jane either, so Jane seemed to think that her ex-husband was making a lot of money. Jane exploded when she realized the truth after being kicked out and facing demands for compensation.
Thought you had money, that's why I wanted to remarry,
she reportedly said. It's a rumor, but perhaps she wanted a second chance at happiness. Still, I feel no sympathy. It seems my ex-husband was easily fooled by Jane, who appeared to respect him. While it's a bit sad to see them lose everything, I wonder if they've experienced the same or even greater hardship than I did during these 3 years. Seeing them like this, I feel a sense of closure. There was a time my ex-husband, having lost everything, managed to find me. I was wrong. Please, let's start over. He pleaded with me for the first time, but I called the police to take him away. After a thorough talk with the police, I believe he won't come to see me again. Feeling fear when he suddenly appeared was a first for me, seeing him in such a state. Since then, Kate and David have been living happily together. They even chose their home close to my new place. Occasionally, they come over to visit, or we go out together. I truly feel this is the happiest I've ever been. I'm looking forward to seeing my grandchildren someday. Michael's baby turned 1 month old, and a celebration was planned. I was invited to Regina's parents' home.
How adorable! Just like an angel.
The moment I reached out to the baby's tiny fist, Regina shouted,
"Don't touch the baby if you're a stranger."
I withdrew my hand in surprise and protested, "I'm Michael's mother. I'm the grandma of this child."
"So?"
Regina smiled mischievously.
"To me, you're a stranger. You're just someone unnecessary once I've gotten the congratulatory money."
"That's terrible."
"You're stingy, just like your deli. It doesn't seem like we'll need anything from you in the future. So, this is where our relationship ends. Don't show your gloomy face around us again. We don't want your poverty rubbing off on our family."
I was momentarily taken aback, but quickly responded with a smile.
"All right then."
Leaving me at the entrance, Regina went back inside. In my heart, I declared war. If that's the attitude you're going to take, I have my plans too. You'll regret this later. I am Margaret, a 55-year-old housewife. Shortly after my eldest son, Michael, started elementary school, I lost my husband. Determined to support Michael through college, I decided to work harder. I quit my part-time job and, using the money my husband had left, started a small delicatessen. Thanks to working tirelessly every day, the deli gradually became successful. And I was able to send Michael to college. When Michael was a child, I was too busy with daily life. We hardly ever had the luxury to go to theme parks or play in the park on weekends like other families. I felt guilty for not being able to give him more attention, fearing I was a failure as a parent. But Michael grew up to be a compassionate person, which relieved me. Michael, who landed a job at a big company, moved out to live on his own. Though he lived in the city, he would come to visit with a bright smile during long weekends. When he got used to his job, he called me one day saying, "There's someone I want you to meet," which excited me. However, I felt anxious as well as happy when Michael brought the young lady home. She was the daughter of the well-known Tucker Industries. I was nervous, thinking it was about making Michael a successor. But it turned out her cousin was set to take over and was already the vice president. Michael's wife, Regina, graduated from a university that only heiresses attend and is currently practicing to be a housewife at her parents' home. "Nice to meet you. Let's get along well, Margaret." The first time we met, she grabbed my hand and vigorously shook it. I could tell she was well-bred from her dining manners and behavior. But her unrestrained and flashy personality made me feel we wouldn't get along. But since Michael chose her, I wanted to get along well. I decided to make an effort to become closer. However, my feelings were quickly trampled upon after they got married. Regina was chatty and had a bright personality. That sounds nice, but her conversations revolved around neighborhood gossip, celebrity news, and speaking ill of acquaintances. The biggest issue was the timing of her visits. She would show up unannounced right when I got back from work and started preparing dinner. Naturally, I ended up inviting her to eat. I don't have any morning sickness at all. I can eat anything. Beer's okay too.
"You shouldn't drink alcohol if you're pregnant." "Really? Is that so?"
Regina's surprised look made me anxious. When she told me she was pregnant, I was as happy as if it were my own news. But Regina seemed to lack awareness as a pregnant woman or had little prior knowledge. And despite claiming she could eat anything, her likes and dislikes were strong. She disliked fish for being too fishy and would only eat meat from certain brands. For dessert after dinner, she wanted expensive fruits like Japanese shine muscat grapes and muskmelons. Moreover, she had a habit of rating the meals after eating.
65 points. Not great.
93 points, could use more spice.
Today is 100 points. Amazing, you passed. Congratulations!
I forced a smile at her full-faced grin. Regina, why do you rate every meal? She said with a broad smile. I'm doing you a favor, practicing. If you can't satisfy your daughter-in-law, your deli might as well shut down.
I've been running it for 20 years in downtown, you know.
My sarcasm didn't land.
It only takes a moment to go under. I wouldn't want to take care of an unemployed Margaret. So, you better work hard.
I'm only 55, yet she treats me like an old lady. Though she seems well-meaning, her constant superior attitude and offensive remarks are infuriating. Having these exchanges 4 or 5 times a week is exhausting. And using her pregnancy as an excuse, she won't even clear the table after eating. Lounging on the sofa with her phone instead. She wouldn't budge, so when I tried to relax with a beer and TV, she complained.
Margaret, that's terrible. Drinking in front of me, is this harassment? Go to your room. I just want to enjoy a drink while watching TV dramas.
Why don't you watch on your mobile phone? You're so inconsiderate. I want to watch on a big screen, not a tiny one. And why do I have to take this from my daughter-in-law? When my irritation reached its peak, Regina packs up Michael's share of dinner, smiles, and leaves. Exhausted, I bathe early and head to bed. Casually asking how they manage weekend dinners, she unabashedly says they use delivery. Deli items, or ready meals.
I'm not good at housework. But I want Michael to eat delicious meals. It would really help if Margaret could prepare weekend dinners too.
I ignored her audacious request. I'm happy Regina comes to visit, but I'm also tired from work. Maybe just once a week would be better? When I couldn't take it anymore and complained to Michael over the phone, this was his response.
Regina's morning sickness is really bad, and she can't do anything at home. I'm swamped with overtime, so I can only help out with the chores on weekends. She's lying down all the time at your place, right?
Having Mom watch over Regina makes me feel relieved. It's her first pregnancy, so she's probably anxious. Please overlook her rudeness.
All right, I understand.
It seems Regina plays the role of a frail pregnant woman in front of Michael. I strongly wanted to show him how she lies on the sofa, laughing while watching videos. But doing so would disappoint kind-hearted Michael and make him feel guilty towards me. Regina is taking advantage of me, knowing I wouldn't do such a thing. That part again irritates me. Though I'm not fond of Regina, I'm looking forward to meeting my grandchild and want to maintain a good relationship with Michael as before. So, I decided not to meddle too much and warmly watch over Michael and his family. I shouldn't impose my opinions on naming the grandchild or insist on living together because he's the eldest son. Instead, when Regina asked, I helped with buying baby supplies, accompanied her to prenatal checkups, and even to church to pray, serving as a dedicated bag carrier. As a grandma, I was eager to help in any way possible. But Regina's attitude grew increasingly overbearing. Lately, she even orders large furniture to be delivered to our home, right in front of me.
Margaret, what do you think of this? It's expensive.
Shall I buy it for you? Offering to buy it was my downfall. After that, she started asking for expensive baby items one after another.
Imported items are more stylish, right? It would be really nice to have a matching set. Regina, why not rent items that are only used for a short period? There are affordable and durable domestic brands too.
I couldn't help but suggest, and Regina glared at me sharply.
Margaret, don't you want to give your grandchild the best?
There's no end to luxury. So, you just don't want to spend the money, huh? Oh, how dreadful.
Dad or Mom would easily shell out $100,000.
I thought, why not ask your dad or mom then? But it seems she has no intention of relying on her parents.
Margaret, you can't take your money to the grave. Let's spend it generously without being stingy.
Her words were so rude that I was at a loss for words. I felt my face heat up with anger, and I almost yelled back, "Mind your own business." No, that's not right. Causing a scene would put Michael in a difficult position, which would be unfair to him. Struggling to control my anger, I tried to speak calmly.
Anyway, let's use rental services for things we can. Savings have their limits. All right, I understand.
Regina reluctantly agreed, though she seemed dissatisfied. My relief was short-lived when Michael called me in the evening.
Regina was asking Mom for various baby items? Yes, well.
Sorry.
I thought she was buying them with the money I've been giving her. I was surprised when I saw the sudden increase in high-brand baby clothes and toys.
I could tell Michael was confused over the phone.
Did she make you spend a lot? Should I pay you back?
No, it's fine.
I was planning to buy her some things anyway.
Really sorry.
Regina wanted a girl, and when we found out at the hospital, she got carried away.
I thought it was more than just getting carried away, but I refrained from speaking ill of Regina and stopped arguing. It's nice that it's a girl as she wanted.
Being a lady, she just has a different sense of money from us. But I don't think she means any harm. I'll tell her not to burden Mom anymore.
Please do. After hanging up, I sighed. I understand the desire to gather cute baby items. Still, it would be common sense to show a little restraint. After that, Michael must have talked to her because Regina stopped asking for expensive baby items altogether. I wished she would stop coming altogether, but Regina kept showing up as if nothing happened. Lately, she seemed to have shifted her strategy to asking for small amounts of money. Thinking if not large sums, then small ones might work.
Look, I can't work because I'm pregnant, so I have no money. But I'm scared Michael will lose interest if I don't keep up appearances. It's okay for someone old like Margaret, but I'm young and want to be loved.
Of course, I had no intention of giving her a penny.
Why don't you ask Michael for more allowance? He'd listen, right?
I can't do that. It would sound like I'm blaming his salary. Regina pouted, snacking on some treats. Being a manager at a major company at 30, he earns more than most of his peers.
But my dad earns more. Oh, sorry.
The words "then ask your dad" almost slipped out, but I held back with all my might. Regina always carried a high-brand bag and wore well-tailored maternity wear. Wanting more despite getting a hefty allowance seemed too selfish. It's not that I think pregnant women shouldn't dress well or housewives should look shabby. But begging your mother-in-law for money is definitely wrong. Though I was upset, looking at Regina's swollen belly calmed my anger. Soon, I'll meet the baby. The thought of becoming a grandma soon tickles me. In that aspect, I'm thankful to Regina. When my sister-in-law, Chelsea, came over the weekend and I vented to her, she was outraged.
The worst daughter-in-law ever. She's taking advantage of you too much. Michael should speak up.
Do you think so? I smiled at Chelsea's indignation.
But you know, I think once the baby is born, her rude behavior towards me will get better. It's not just maternity blues, it's her character. Don't get your hopes up.
Maybe.
But I get along with Michael, and I don't want to ruin their marriage.
Chelsea sighed in frustration.
Don't keep it all to yourself. I'm here to listen to your complaints anytime.
Thanks, Chelsea. I smiled at Chelsea. For now, let's just pray that the baby is born safely. Eventually, Regina gave birth without any issues. I wanted to meet the baby, but since she went straight to her parents' house after being discharged, I decided to wait until Regina was feeling better. Michael, stopping by Regina's parents' house after work, sends me pictures of the baby daily. I can only imagine how adorable the baby must be in person, and my anticipation grows. When the baby was about a month old, Michael contacted me. Regina wants to have a baby reveal party. A reveal party? Yeah, at her parents' house, inviting relatives. Can we invite our side too? Thomas and the others are on board. That sounds good. Why not invite the same group as we did for the wedding? I'll do that. Then, I'll start reaching out. My relatives all live in the same state. They love events, so they'd be happy to come. As expected, when I informed them of the date, they all wanted to come. On the day, I arrived a bit early with a gift for the baby, intending to greet Regina's parents first. I rang the doorbell of the grand house, surrounded by a high fence, and a mature woman's voice responded. The parents were often away for work, so a housekeeper was always there. The person who came to the door must have been her. As I reached the grand entrance along the slope, Regina, in a floral dress, greeted me at the foyer, holding the innocent baby in her arms. Dad and Mom got called into sudden work, so they're not back yet. Busy even on a Sunday. I greeted and was about to enter when Regina coldly asked, "The gift for the baby?" "Oh, yes, here." Handing the baby to the waiting housekeeper, Regina watched as I searched my bag. She snatched the envelope as I pulled it out and opened it right there. "Are we checking gifts in front of everyone?" Ignoring my surprise, Regina pulled out the contents and frowned in displeasure. $1,000? That's too little. I thought that was the going rate. At least $50,000 should be in there. Well, can't expect much from poor people. As Regina put the gift back into the envelope, the housekeeper stood behind her, holding the baby, who yawned adorably. Drawn by the baby's cuteness, I approached the housekeeper. "How adorable, just like an angel." As I reached out to the baby's tightly clenched little fist. "Don't touch the baby if you're a stranger." Startled by the sudden shout, I pulled my hand back. As the baby began to cry, Regina commanded the housekeeper, "Take him to his room, now." Yes. After the housekeeper took the baby away, I protested to Regina. "I am Michael's mother. I'm the grandma of this child." "So?" Regina smirked mischievously. "To me, you're a stranger. You're just someone unnecessary once I've gotten the congratulatory money." "That's terrible. You're stingy, just like your deli. It doesn't seem like we'll need anything from you in the future. So, this is where our relationship ends." She fluttered her hand, shooing me away. "Thanks for your efforts. You can go home now. Don't ever show me that gloomy face again. We don't want your poverty rubbing off on our family." I was momentarily shocked, but quickly responded with a smile. "All right then." Leaving me at the entrance, Regina went back inside. Her words kept swirling in my head. This was the first time in my life I had been subjected to such a terrible humiliation. Why do I have to be spoken to like this by my daughter-in-law? Clenching my fists as if my bones would crush, I declared war in my heart. "If that's the attitude you're going to take, I have my plans too. You'll regret this later." When I opened the front door, my relatives were crossing the garden, coming my way. "Huh? Margaret, are you leaving already?" Regina, who came out to greet them, smiled at the puzzled relatives. "Margaret has some errands to run. Dinner is about to arrive." You could have stayed and eaten with us. She's in a hurry.
Welcome everyone. It seems Michael and his parents will be a little while longer. Please make yourselves comfortable in the meantime.
Regina ushered the relatives inside, closed the front door, and immediately locked it. Regina, who is good at putting on a facade, is popular with our relatives. At my husband's anniversary memorial, she went around pouring drinks for the older men, introducing herself. Despite being beautiful and wealthy, her cheerful and friendly demeanor left a very good impression. So, no one doubted Regina's words this time. I decided to resort to my last option. I headed somewhere. 2 hours later, I pressed Regina's family's doorbell again. In front of the relatives, Regina, who reluctantly let me in, whispered to me irritably.
Why did you come back?
I forgot something important.
Huh? Oh, you brought the rest of the congratulatory money. Such a small amount was indeed embarrassing.
Passing by the smirking Regina, I proceeded down the hall filled with lively voices. Opening the door, I found a spacious dining room where both families were gathered around a huge table. Although Regina's parents and Michael were nowhere to be seen, the table was laden with appetizers, and the relatives were happily sharing beer and wine.
Margaret, you came back. Come over here. We have bourbon and cocktails too. Why not have the housekeeper bring some?
I smiled at the beckoning relatives. Thank you, Trevor. But before that, I have something I'd like to reveal too.
Oh, what's that? A surprise gift?
To Regina's nonchalant question, I responded just as pleasantly.
Yes, a surprise. Now, everyone, please listen.
Clapping my hands, I silenced the chatter of the relatives and opened the voice recording app on my mobile phone, pressing play.
Don't touch the baby if you're a stranger.
Regina's shout echoed in the suddenly quiet room.
Is that Regina's voice?
The room buzzed with confusion.
Once you've given the congratulatory money, you're unnecessary. With your stingy delicatessen, we won't need anything from you in the future. So, this is where our relationship ends. Don't ever show that gloomy face again. We don't want your poverty rubbing off on our family.
No matter how many times I hear it, it's a terrible line. It seems I'm not the only one who thinks so, as the women in the family began to criticize Regina.
Even if a daughter-in-law and mother-in-law are traditionally at odds, this is too much. Margaret raised Michael alone while running the delicatessen, enduring so much. To belittle her like this is unforgivable. What's this? Just because her parents are wealthy, she acts so haughty. Such a nasty daughter-in-law.
Not just my relatives, but even Regina's family expressed their anger.
To say such things to your mother-in-law is unbelievable.
We're so sorry for our Regina. This is embarrassing for us too.
Being spoiled as a lady is one thing, but doesn't she know the difference between right and wrong? At her age, such lack of manners.
Faced with the cold stares of the relatives, Regina showed panic. Her cheeks twitching, she hurriedly tried to smooth things over.
Stop joking around, Margaret. Oh, I get it. You're jealous because Michael always defends me, so you made this up.
Regina covered her face with her hands and started to fake cry. I've tried so hard to get along with Margaret, and this is how she treats me? That's cruel. The women all had faces of disbelief. However, the men were easily deceived, looking confused and at each other.
Come on, that's too harsh. Yeah, ganging up on her. Poor thing, she started crying. Margaret, what's the meaning of this? Are you acting spitefully because Michael chose Regina? It's always the mother-in-law bullying the daughter-in-law, isn't it? Everyone knows Regina is a good girl. Don't pull such pranks, Margaret.
The men quickly sided with Regina, who must have been inwardly mocking them. Then the women exploded in anger.
Good girl? When we had a gathering at Margaret's, she refused to help in the kitchen, escaping to the dining area. Ignored calls for help, flirting with the men all the time. Right. When we were supposed to bring dishes for the meal, she lied about injuring her hand and brought store-bought items, then had the audacity to claim hers was the best.
Men are really weak against this type of girl. No eye for character. The dining room turned into a battleground of men versus women, mixing my relatives with Regina's. The once lively dining room was now filled with a tense atmosphere. As the housekeeper, flustered, brought in more beer, the doorbell rang. Chelsea entered the dining room, guided by the housekeeper. With a thick, bulging envelope of congratulatory money in her hand, catching Regina's eye. Chelsea, welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Here's the congratulatory money. Oh!
Chelsea deliberately let the envelope slip from her hand, scattering its contents across the table.
Oh dear, I forgot to seal it. Sorry about that. Huh? Who's that in the picture with Regina?
A relative picked up a photo, murmuring suspiciously. Regina turned around in shock. But before Regina could collect the photos, several relatives grabbed them, exclaiming in unison.
Whoa! This looks like evidence of an affair.
It was a sight one would want to look away from. Photos captured Regina being hugged by an unknown man, kissing as she got out of a car, and entering a hotel together. As the relatives were shocked, Regina hurriedly tried to explain.
It's not what it looks like. He's just an acquaintance. He loves physical affection. And the hotel, he said he felt sick, so I accompanied him inside.
Her excuses sounded incredibly feeble. Even the men who had defended Regina were now giving her cold looks. As if delivering the final blow, Chelsea turned on a voice recorder. And a conversation between Regina and the man played out.
Can't wait for my child to be born.
It's a hassle if your wife finds out, so let's just say it's Michael's and mine, okay? Shame, but we have no choice.
He's so dumb, thinking you're just a friend.
Hilarious.
We can get away with it since Michael and I have the same blood type from our college days.
What if the child looks just like you? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Their laughter ended the recording. Regina, pale-faced, turned to Chelsea.
Why do you have this? Oh, didn't I mention? I run a private investigation firm.
Chelsea smiled slightly.
Margaret asked me to look into you because of your reckless spending and suspicious behavior. And, as expected, it turned out to be an affair. I intended to keep this to myself to avoid ruining the marriage. But seeing no change in your attitude, Regina, I thought you deserved a punishment.
Regina glared at me with a venomous look.
So, it was your doing.
As Regina lunged at me, Chelsea quickly grabbed her arm, stepping in between. Shaking off Chelsea's grip, Regina threatened in a low voice.
Remember, keep quiet about this to Michael. It would be pitiful for the child to be abandoned by Dad right after being born. Everyone agrees, right?
Her self-serving logic was astounding, but Regina desperately sought agreement from the relatives.
Michael loves children, and if he remains unaware, he'll adore this child. So, let's keep this a secret, okay?
A deep, resonant voice froze everyone, including Regina and me. Looking towards the source, we saw Michael standing at the doorway. It seemed he had entered the house with Chelsea and had been eavesdropping from the hallway.
Michael.
Approaching Regina, Michael looked at her with disdain and angrily retorted.
We used to go out for drinks, the four of us, including his wife, before Regina got pregnant. I never imagined you two were meeting alone afterwards. Laughing at me, both of you. I'm sorry. Please, don't talk about divorce.
Regina pleaded with puppy eyes, but Michael shouted back.
Of course we're getting a divorce. Insulting not just me but also my mom, unforgivable.
Michael and Regina glared at each other for a while, but eventually, Regina was the first to back down.
Fine, we can get a divorce. But I'm keeping custody of the child. I've always wanted a child.
Even at this point, she insisted as if she had done nothing wrong. What an audacious woman. The relatives watched the exchange between Regina and Michael, tense. With clasped hands and a dreamy expression, Regina began to speak.
I think the child will look like me and be incredibly beautiful. Then I'll dress her in stylish clothes and take her everywhere. A young and beautiful me with a cute daughter. We could become famous as a beautiful mother-daughter duo. She's definitely going to be a model or actress someday. I'm so glad I had a daughter. Hey, children aren't accessories. Are you raising her just to show off? That's pitiful for the child. Being a single mother is tough. Do you understand what it entails to work and raise a child?
At my words, Regina laughed in a high-pitched tone.
Who do you think I am? I'm the daughter of Tucker Industries. Unlike your delicatessen, I have endless money. My dad and mom will help, and with housekeepers and babysitters, I won't have to care for the child. I can live leisurely without working hard.
After boasting, she twisted her lips into a sneer.
Well, being from a single-parent family might be disadvantageous for school applications. So I plan to remarry someone suitable. Next time, not a company employee but a handsome CEO of an IT company. Such a man would let me have more freedom to play.
Seems like it, Mr. Tucker. Chelsea called out, and Regina's parents appeared from the back door. Shocked and speechless, Chelsea explained to us.
Actually, the Tuckers asked me to investigate Regina's behavior. They pretended to go to work today but stayed hidden, wanting to expose Regina's true nature. She had always worn a mask in front of her parents.
The Tucker couple stepped into the center of the room and bowed deeply to us. Everyone, we apologize for the disturbance Regina has caused. We don't know how to make it up to Michael and Margaret. With a pained expression, they looked at Regina. Regina, now as pale as paper, was trembling. Thomas, Regina's father, sighed deeply and lamented in a low voice. To betray Margaret like this. I'm ashamed of my own daughter.
But...
Regina suddenly looked up at her father. Moving closer with tearful eyes and a sweet tone, starting to make excuses.
I was bullied by Margaret. There's no proof, no images or recordings, but she said many mean things to me. It hurt, so I retaliated. Dad, you believe me, right?
As I was about to argue, Regina's mother, Selena, sharply said.
Lies. Margaret isn't like that.
Selena turned to me and declared.
As a fan of that shop, I can't accept what you've said. Take it back. What?
Regina, wide-eyed, listened as Thomas explained.
Selena and I are regulars at Margaret's Delicatessen. We often rely on it for business trips and dining with clients. For mom friends' home parties, we order delivery. That way, I only need to make desserts. The dishes with organic vegetables are famous for being healthy and delicious. I've known Margaret since before Michael's marriage, haven't I mentioned it before? Really?
Regina, sweating profusely. She had likely been tuning it out. Selena, with a look of disgust, turned to Regina and said,
We've overlooked your whims to some extent until now, but this time, your behavior towards Michael and Margaret is inexcusable.
Exactly.
Casually lying, demeaning others. After having an affair, you plan to raise another man's child as Michael's. That's the lowest of the low.
Thomas glared at Regina with icy eyes and firmly declared,
We're disowning you as of today. What? That's troubling. What am I supposed to do starting tomorrow?
Figure it out yourself. You're 30, aren't you?
How long do you plan to depend on others?
Why don't you remarry him?
He's the real dad, right?
That's impossible. He said he wouldn't leave his wife. Oh no. I don't want to work. Regina let out a pitiful cry.
Michael, I'm sorry. It was all my fault.
Regina started to deeply apologize at mine and Michael's feet.
Margaret, I'm sorry for everything. Please forgive me.
Mom, let's go home.
We should get our congratulatory money back.
There's no obligation to pay it to a complete stranger. Yes, let's do that. I'll take mine back too.
Me too, I've lost my appetite.
Michael took the envelope from the black tray, and the other relatives followed suit.
If it's not Michael's child, there's no need for a gift. Right, it's ridiculous.
I thought it was a chance to make some pocket money by exploiting the baby. As Regina crumbled to her knees, the relatives, without a glance in her direction, left the meal and the celebration came to a miserable end. The room was left with scattered dishes, half-drunk beverages, and meals, marking the desolate conclusion of the reveal party. Unwilling to work, Regina cried and refused the divorce but was persuaded by the Tuckers to reluctantly sign. The compensation for the divorce lawsuit was fronted by her parents. Afterward, Regina was kicked out of her home. She moved into an apartment with moving and initial costs borrowed from her parents, starting to live alone. The Tuckers decided they couldn't leave the baby with Regina and chose to raise it themselves. They also demanded child support and recognition from the baby's father, who complied. Regina, who had lived a life of leisure, must be struggling with her first part-time job. After all, she has to pay back her parents for the moving expenses and compensation, in addition to her living costs. Regina, now deprived of the luxury to dress fashionably or enjoy leisure activities, seems to be working desperately every day, her hair disheveled. Though Michael and I have cut ties with Regina, our relationship with the Tucker couple continues. After the reveal party, the parents came to me with an apology gift. We were wrong in how we raised her. We're terribly sorry to both Michael and Margaret. Their tearful apologies eased some of my unresolved anger. Thankfully, they continue to frequent the delicatessen, which has thrived on word of mouth and has more customers now than it did 10 years ago. I'm currently busy preparing for the opening of a second location. Michael, too, seems to have regained his spirits and is diligently working. Both of us are living busy yet fulfilling lives. Someday, if fate allows and Michael has his own child, we plan to shower that child with endless love.
If you don't want kids, maybe I'll have them. Maybe I should just divorce and we have them.
Suddenly, the word divorce popped up at an oddly serene dinner table. My heart skipped a beat and I inadvertently stopped what I was doing. But I quickly lifted my head and faced the two of them again.
All right, we're getting a divorce, then.
Huh? Despite being the ones to bring it up, both looked surprised at my response. Seeing their reaction, I immediately backtracked on the divorce talk.
Right, of course. You're obviously joking.
Osamand laughed, relieved. Next to him, Carly covered her mouth with her hand, chuckling along. But the truth is, I do want a divorce. However, I haven't gathered enough evidence yet. I'm far from ready to make a move. I want to set things straight with Osamand and others, but only when everything is in order. This conversation only made me more determined than before.
Yeah, just kidding.
I joined in on Osamand's laughter, making sure not to let on that I'm serious about wanting a divorce. My name is Lena. I'm 27. I used to work in an office at a design company, but after getting married, I quit my job to become a housewife. My husband's name is Osamand. We met at a party I was invited to by a friend. I've never been good at socializing. On days off, I'd stay in, and even on work days, I'd skip out on drinking parties and outings, preferring to spend time alone. Because of that lifestyle, it's no surprise I hadn't had a boyfriend in a while. All my friends and juniors were either married or in relationships. It made me anxious whenever the topic of boyfriends or husbands came up. I felt the pressure to find someone soon when this opportunity came from a friend. My friend was surprised I took up the invitation.
Wow, I invited you without expecting much. I know I'm the one that invited you, but did something happen? Nothing really. Just had a change of heart. I'm getting to that age where I should find a boyfriend and start thinking about the future.
I shared my thoughts without holding anything back. Then,
I see. You've had a change of heart. I'm glad I invited you,
my friend said, laughing. On the day of the party, I went to the bar, which was the venue, with my friend, and a few people were already there, chatting and having a good time. She easily joined the group, but I couldn't. Even as the party started, I couldn't manage to join in on the conversations and ended up drinking alone at the edge of the room. I wondered if it was impossible for someone like me to find a boyfriend. I stared at my nearly empty glass, lost in thought. The lively chatter from around me filled the air. My friend seemed to be enjoying the party, being at the center of the conversation. I envied those who could genuinely enjoy such gatherings. I wished I could be like that. As I looked at my watch thinking about leaving early, someone approached me.
Hey, what's up?
You look pretty lonely over here.
Huh.
A man started talking to me. That man would later become my husband, Osamand. Would you like to talk with me?
Yes, I would.
Osamand took a seat next to me, placing the drink he had been sipping on the table. We had introduced ourselves earlier, so we knew each other's names. So, you're Lena, right?
Yes, and you're Osamand. That's right. Thanks for remembering my name.
Osamand thanked me, looking genuinely pleased. After that, we didn't join the rest of the group, opting instead to continue our conversation just between the two of us. We started with work, then moved on to hobbies, and even where we lived, the topics varied.
Wow, really?
Osamand seemed to pick up on my nervousness and made an effort to keep the conversation lively. Before I knew it, I was swept up in his enthusiasm, and my nervousness had vanished. Osamand was having fun talking, and he seemed genuinely interested in listening to me. Eventually, I found myself becoming fond of Osamand. I myself thought I was too easy. But for someone who doesn't usually talk to people, this was enough to make me take notice. After the party ended, we went to a bar to continue drinking, just the two of us. Alone with me, Osamand's demeanor changed completely from before, becoming more composed. Perhaps he had been playing up to the atmosphere before. Yet, his willingness to listen to me remained unchanged. Seeing this side of Osamand made my feelings for him grow.
Today was fun. Thank you.
Thank you as well. We hit it off so well that we exchanged our numbers and agreed to meet again. After that, we started seeing each other frequently. Could things really go this smoothly? The moment I decided to find a boyfriend, I was invited to a party and met someone compatible. I had expected more of a struggle, so I was a bit taken aback by how easily things were progressing. About 2 months after the party, Osamand confessed his feelings, and we started dating. He was just as kind to me as he had been before we were officially together. Whenever we both had time off, we would go on drives or trips, spending time together. That said, Osamand was busy with work, so our schedules didn't always match up, and we probably saw each other less often than other couples might. But we made up for it with phone calls and emails. I was satisfied with that. To say I wasn't lonely would be a lie. I wanted to see Osamand more, to be with Osamand more. Those feelings only grew stronger day by day. However, on the days we could meet, I was filled with happiness. Each time, I was reminded of how much I liked Osamand. Then one day, during our usual routine, Osamand suddenly introduced me to a woman. I want you to meet someone. Carly. She's an old friend of mine.
Pleased to meet you.
The woman introduced as Carly was Osamand's childhood friend. From what I heard, Osamand and Carly had been close since kindergarten, and they still visited each other's parents' homes and went out to eat together. Carly has always been such a great person. Oh, remember that time?
Wait, why are you bringing that up now? I mean, it did happen, but...
Osamand and Carly were completely engrossed in their own world, chatting away. Naturally, I had no idea how to navigate this situation. All I could do was watch them with a forced smile, feeling out of place. Noticing my discomfort, Osamand said,
I'm sorry. I figured you'd be seeing Carly around, so I thought I'd introduce you.
Honestly, I wondered why I needed to get along with his childhood friend in the future. But I wasn't strong enough to voice such thoughts there and then. I just went along with it, trying not to upset Osamand and his friend.
Oh, is that so?
But you didn't know I was meeting with you today, right? Sorry if it feels like I just showed up out of the blue.
Not at all. Please don't worry about it. I'm really glad to meet you. Really? Thank you.
Carly smiled sweetly, thanking me. However, as time went on, Osamand and Carly continued to create their own little world, leaving me feeling left out. At first, I desperately tried to join in their conversation, but eventually, I realized it was futile and just sat there, sipping my coffee alone. If they were going to talk amongst themselves, I wondered why I was even needed there. I felt a mix of sadness and emptiness, silently observing them. The situation didn't change until 2 hours later when I finally managed to excuse myself from their company, after being treated like I wasn't there. I'm really sorry. It's been a while since I've seen Carly.
I see. No, it's totally fine. It's good that you got to catch up after so long.
Yeah. I'm really sorry. Osamand apologized, seeming genuinely remorseful. It appeared he was aware that he had done something wrong. I couldn't help feeling slightly angry that he had created this exclusive world with Carly in the first place. No, really, it's okay. I accepted Osamand's apology without holding any grudge. After that incident, Osamand never brought up Carly again. Perhaps he realized it was a sensitive issue. He started to check on my feelings more, likely thinking he had indeed made a mistake. At the time, I felt lonely and insecure, but deep down, I knew it wasn't something to make a big deal about. After all, they were childhood friends. It made sense that they'd get caught up in conversation after a long time apart. However, I couldn't bring myself to say I was okay with Carly. I didn't want to dredge up the topic myself. A few weeks after meeting Carly, Osamand's behavior returned to normal, and it felt like our daily life had resumed. A year later, Osamand proposed, and we got married. The wedding was attended by family, friends, colleagues, and Carly. Carly seemed genuinely happy for us.
Congratulations on your wedding. I'm sure you know, but Osamand is really a great guy, and I believe you'll be very happy together. Thank you.
Carly made a point to come over to me and speak. Her smile was a complex mix of happiness and loneliness. After the wedding, we returned to the new apartment we had rented as a married couple. Though we were already officially married and lived together, I remembered when we moved in and felt somewhat embarrassed. Osamand was right there beside me. Just the thought of being able to share the same space with him from now on filled my heart with joy. I couldn't help but smile at the thought of our future together. I wanted to spend forever with Osamand. However, this happy life did not last long. Even after marriage, Osamand was still busy with work, but he made sure to spend as much time with me as possible. Except for when he had work dinners or special occasions, he would always come home before the date changed, and despite being tired himself, he would offer kind words to me as I did the housework. He was with me all weekend, taking me on trips and shopping. It might have seemed ordinary, but I felt truly happy with just that. But then, suddenly, a certain person started to intrude on our lives, significantly changing our routine. It was during a weekend shopping trip in town with Osamand. I spotted a familiar figure. It was Carly. She had seen us too and hurried over with a happy expression.
Hey, Osamand, Lena. Carly. What a coincidence.
As I was about to greet her, Osamand casually reached out and tousled Carly's hair.
Hey, Osamand. You're messing up my hair.
Sorry. I just can't help it when I see you. I understood that they were close, but seeing them like this pained my heart. Osamand didn't seem to think it was a big deal, and Carly didn't seem to mind. They started talking without paying any attention to me, reigniting a sense of emptiness within me. I didn't know what to do, so I just looked at nearby products and thought vaguely about where to go next. Despite being able to see me, Carly continued to talk to Osamand without any concern. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes before ending. Sorry. I didn't realize you two were on a date today. My bad.
It's fine.
Right, Lena?
Yeah, it's fine.
Unable to deny it, I pretended not to mind. Since that day, Carly began to appear more frequently wherever Osamand and I went out together. I thought it was a coincidence the first 2 times, but after it kept happening, I couldn't help but think they were arranging it behind my back. Whenever they met, they acted as if it were a chance encounter.
Wow.
What a coincidence. That became their routine phrase. Once, I gathered the courage to ask, are you two in touch? Seeing each other so often when we're out, it seems unlikely to be just coincidence. However, they wouldn't admit it.
No, it's just a coincidence.
Right, Carly?
Yeah. Just a coincidence. Happened to be, right?
They laughed it off together. But their expressions seemed almost mocking. They would hold hands or touch each other's cheeks every time they met. Their level of physical affection seemed excessive. Despite being told they had always been this way, claiming it was normal for childhood friends, something about it didn't sit right with me.
Wait, should we stop holding hands? Lena looks mad.
Sorry, Lena. But Carly is really just an old friend.
There's absolutely nothing weird between us, so don't worry, okay? Hey, what's that supposed to mean? Well, it's not like I like you or anything.
After Carly's comment, Osamand cheerfully placed his hand on her head again. Despite my anger, Osamand continued his physical affection with Carly. Carly didn't seem to mind at all. Is it normal for childhood friends to be this close? Watching Osamand and Carly, my distrust grew day by day. After several similar incidents, I mustered up the courage to speak to Osamand.
Osamand. What's up?
Osamand looked at me with his usual kind smile. About Carly.
I know she's your childhood friend, and I understand you're close, but could you maybe reduce the physical affection a bit? Reduce it!
Yeah, since we're married. Osamand's face turned serious for a moment before he relaxed again. That brief serious expression scared me, making me regret bringing it up.
Sorry. Was it bothering you?
A little. Normally, Osamand would laugh it off and agree. But he was different that day. But you know, Carly and I are just childhood friends, right? There's really nothing to worry about.
What does that mean?
Just don't think too much about it. Consider it part of our communication. Okay. With a troubled smile, he walked away from me. Seeing this, I couldn't help but feel anxious, regretting my question and wondering if I had made an unreasonable request or upset Osamand. At the same time, I questioned if I was wrong. As his wife, I wanted him to limit his physical contact with Carly, even though they were childhood friends. Nonetheless, life with Osamand continued uneasily. A month after my request, nothing had changed. In fact, it seemed to get worse. Carly started to intrude on our home. She would come over on weekdays and weekends, eat, and then leave, with me preparing everything. Carly would just show up suddenly, spending time talking to Osamand on the sofa. Even when I asked for help with carrying things.
You can handle that much on your own, right? Yeah.
She would dismiss my request. By this time, Osamand had completely taken Carly's side. He hardly listened to me and always spoke in Carly's favor when I objected. Seriously. Lena can't do anything by herself.
Hey, don't say that in front of her, that's the worst.
They laughed at me as if I were a joke. Naturally, I didn't feel good about it. Whenever I returned to the kitchen without saying anything, I would end up being criticized.
Is she sulking?
Over just this?
Come on, that's a bit much, isn't it?
I continued preparing the meal, trying to ignore their voices. It seemed only fair that she help with preparations since she came over uninvited. Yet, why should I be the one to face complaints? Moreover, being accused of sulking or being incapable of doing anything alone was incredibly rude. Carly came over several times a week. And she always made sure to have a meal before leaving. Even during meals, there was no sense of calm. Carly would sit next to Osamand, constantly pestering him. Osamand seemed to not mind her actions. They would feed each other or share laughs, looking entirely like a couple to anyone observing. But it turns out Carly actually had a fiancé named Raymond. He worked at the same company as Carly, holding a rather prestigious position. Though I heard he was abroad currently. Still, I thought it inappropriate for someone engaged to engage in such excessive physical intimacy with their childhood friend.
Carly, could you maybe stop coming over so often? The food costs are adding up, and it's more work to cook.
However, Osamand just laughed off my request. Come on.
Carly's single right now, and she says it's lonely going home to an empty house. Maybe we should be a bit more understanding.
But
it's fine, really.
Osaman didn't seem inclined to criticize Carly at all. In fact, he seemed happier with her than with me. I wondered why Osaman couldn't show me the same smile. Eventually, I began to despise not only Carly but also the sight of Osaman smiling at her. A year into our marriage, Carly's intrusions continued unabated. By this time, I had given up, no longer complaining and simply catering to Carly. Maybe this was the arrangement Osaman and Carly desired. Their physical intimacy intensified, and they appeared even happier than before. I dreaded that this lifestyle would persist until Carly got married. The thought filled me with gloom. Divorce. The word started to cross my mind occasionally. Yet, I found it hard to take any action. Time kept moving forward. But one day, a comment from Carly prompted me to decide on divorce. "Hey, aren't you two planning to have kids?"
What?
Her tactless remark made me exclaim in surprise. Osaman and I had decided not to have children yet. And we might never do so. That's what I thought I had said, but... Lena's just really against it.
What? I never said that.
I hadn't said anything of the sort. Osaman was trying to look good in front of Carly. I glared and contradicted him. Really, Lena?
It's been about a year since you got married, right?
Why would you be against it? No, I never said I was against. But Carly wasn't listening at all. Didn't Osaman like kids? Lena, isn't it selfish to say no? I'm not being selfish. I never said that. It's a real concern. Osaman continued to take Carly's side. Even in this situation, choosing his childhood friend over his wife. It made me realize for the first time that perhaps I couldn't continue going on with him. Then Carly said something outrageous, pushing me further.
If you don't want kids, maybe I'll have them. Maybe I should just divorce and we have them.
Osaman joined in with her laughter, not rebuking Carly's words. The casual mention of divorce shocked me, my heart raced, and I stopped what I was doing. Divorce. There are jokes that can be made and ones that shouldn't be. The inability to distinguish between the two was exasperating. However, I quickly faced them again. All right, we're getting a divorce, then.
Huh?
They were surprised, even though they brought it up. I quickly corrected the notion of divorce.
Just kidding. Maybe it's time we started thinking about kids. Right, of course. You're obviously joking.
Osaman laughed, relieved, while Carly covered her mouth beside him, smiling joyously. Such a happy occasion. But the truth was, I did want a divorce. Despite joking about it, I couldn't shake the thought. I'll really get a divorce. Annoyingly, Carly's remark made me decide to divorce Osaman. Yet, it was too early to act.
Yeah, just kidding.
While formulating a plan in my head, I responded to Osaman. From observing Osaman and Carly up close, I suspected they might be having an affair. If that was the case, my options were limited. After much thought, I decided to hire a detective to gather evidence of the affair. I also tried to sneak a peek at Osaman's mobile phone to gather evidence myself. If they weren't cheating, I'd think of something else. But there was no need. When I checked Osaman's unlocked phone, there was an abundance of exchanges with Carly. The content was damning. From sweet conversations akin to those of lovers to suggestive messages and photos from hotel visits. There was more than enough to call it evidence. Considering Osaman didn't lock his phone, he seemed utterly careless. Further investigation by the detective confirmed they met frequently. Mostly at hotels. The dates they met matched the days Osaman told me he'd be home late. He had lied about overtime and drinking parties to meet Carly. Even though I had a vague idea they were cheating, seeing concrete evidence made me feel indescribable. Meanwhile, Osamand and Carly's behavior didn't change. Carly kept coming over, eating, teasing me, and having fun. Unaware of what I was doing behind the scenes, their carefree actions seemed almost ludicrous. About a month after I started gathering evidence, Osamand invited me to an event.
There's an engagement party for Carly next month.
Engagement party? Yeah, you know Carly's fiancé is pretty high up, right? So, they need to have a sort of introduction party for the marriage.
So, her partner is coming back? Yeah, I think he might already be back.
The engagement party was irrelevant to me. The nerve of having such a party while engaging in an affair baffled me.
I see.
You've been invited? You should go, I said dismissively, somewhat irritated by Osamand's nonchalant laughter. But his response was unexpected. What are you talking about? You're coming with me.
Me? With you? Why?
Because you've always been so helpful to Carly. Oh, I see. She wants me there because I was helpful. Did they really invite me for that reason? My heart, already jaded, doubted even the reason for my invitation. But it would be rude to decline if I was invited. I thought you might not like parties. Can you manage?
No, I'll go. She invited me, after all.
Osamand's face brightened at my words.
Great. I'll let Carly know.
He seemed pleased as he went to his room with his phone, likely to contact Carly. In truth, I didn't want to go. The last thing I wanted was to see Carly happy. Why should I put myself in such a situation? However, as I prepared, an idea struck me. This plan could significantly change my current predicament. If so, using the party to my advantage was too good an opportunity to miss. What I'm about to do is low as a person. But I had been tormented by Osamand and Carly far more. A little revenge seemed justified. I prepared for the party and my plan of retaliation simultaneously. A month later, the day of the party arrived. Dressed appropriately, Osamand and I headed to the venue. Entering the venue, the opulence of chandeliers, carpets, and tables made me hesitate. The old Osamand would have reassured me here, but now he was busy scanning the room for someone. The guests all seemed important, making me feel out of place. Then, someone called out.
Osamand. You made it.
Turning toward the voice, I saw Carly, accompanied by a fresh-faced young man and a kindly-looking elderly couple. Apparently, the young man was Carly's fiancé, Raymond, and the elderly couple were her parents.
Congratulations, Carly. Thank you. And to you too, and Raymond too. Congratulations.
Thank you for your kind words. Osamand was unusually polite, a side of him I might have never seen before. Afterward, the party officially began with an announcement. After getting my meal, I returned to my seat to find Osamand and Carly's parents engaged in a lively conversation. Osamand, you and Carly are childhood friends, right? What was she like back then?
Carly back then? Hey, that's kind of embarrassing.
Osamand, unfazed by Carly's embarrassment, shared stories of her past.
She liked catching bugs and racing. We used to play tag a lot.
You're really going to tell that story? Carly squirmed, visibly embarrassed, but not entirely displeased. You two really are close. Watching you, it's like you're real siblings. I knew it was impolite, but I couldn't let myself be swept along if I wanted to execute my plan. I apologized internally as I interjected. Osaman seemed surprised by my interruption. Eyes wide.
Really? What's it like when Carly is with Osamand?
They're very close. How should I put it? They're like lovers.
Hey, Lena!
Osaman tried to stop me, but I continued. Carly often comes over for meals. She talks with Osaman the whole time I'm preparing food, looking very happy. During meals, they feed each other, hold hands. They're really close.
Hey, what are you?
I could feel the atmosphere freeze with my words. Carly's parents and Raymond looked at Osamand and Carly as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing.
Feed each other? Yes. Oh, I don't have photos of them feeding each other, but I do have pictures of them looking very close and their exchanges. Would you like to see? Hey! Lena!
Before Osamand could stop me, I opened my mobile phone to show the evidence gathered by the detective and myself. Raymond's face paled significantly upon seeing it.
Lena! Don't say weird things.
Weird? I'm just sharing the truth. This is how you two usually are. Osamand bit his lip, unable to say anything, his expression sour. But Carly lashed out at me. I felt vindicated. I had never seen Osamand and Carly look so frustrated. Deciding to go through with my revenge felt right.
Lena! Stop being freaky! And why do you have these photos? You shouldn't know about this. What? Did you hire a detective? Unbelievable!
Yes, I hired a detective. Why? Osamand was taken aback, realizing his actions with Carly, which went beyond mere childhood friendship, had been exposed.
Want to know why?
I pulled out a completed divorce application from my bag and slammed it in front of Osamand. Let's get divorced. I can't take it anymore.
There's no need to say that here. Ever since we got married, Carly has been a constant presence in my life. We ran into her whenever we went out, and despite asking you to keep distance, she came over for dinner multiple times. And to top it off, you lied about working late to meet her at hotels. What's the point of being married then?
I let it all out. Osamand's loud response had drawn the attention of everyone in the venue.
I know it was wrong, but... If you knew it was wrong, why didn't you stop? Didn't I ask you to stop repeatedly?
Well, yes, but...
You don't really think it was wrong, do you? If you did, you wouldn't make excuses, you'd apologize.
Yeah, sorry. As Osamand and I argued, Carly attempted to intervene.
Hey, stop arguing here. Raymond, Mom, Dad, help.
However, the three of them did not take Carly's side.
Carly, those photos are real, aren't they? What? I'm asking if they're real. Not that you'd admit to cheating on your own.
Raymond looked profoundly disheartened. Understandably so. He must have been thinking of his fiancée Carly while working abroad, only to find her cheating with her childhood friend.
With so much evidence, I can't marry you. I was a fool to trust you. Wait. That's not true. They're all lies. Lies? So, you're saying Lena fabricated all this just to trap you and Osamand? Yes, that's right.
What? I couldn't hold back anymore. Was she not satisfied after manipulating me all this much? Still trying to control the narrative? Even now, Carly wouldn't admit to the affair, which infuriated me further, and I couldn't help but shout.
Who would do such a thing for you? I don't have the time for that. If I were to spend my time on you, I'd rather find a new hobby. What did you say?
Carly snapped back at my words. However, it was Carly's parents who stopped her.
Carly! Enough! Aren't you ashamed of yourself for doing such things?
Dad.
I never thought you would do something like this. Sure, you and Osaman were close, but I never imagined it would lead to this. It's truly shameful. What? Don't say it's shameful.
It is embarrassing. Raymond, I'm so sorry. It's understandable that you can't marry her now, and we won't mind if you call off the engagement. I too must apologize. I'm truly sorry. Watching her parents apologize to Raymond, Carly seemed to realize the irreparable mistake she had made. Tears streaming, she pleaded with Raymond.
I'm sorry. Please, don't call off the engagement.
I've had enough of you. I can't marry you.
No.
Osaman, witnessing Carly's situation, also begged for my forgiveness. Lena, I'm really sorry. I'll never cheat again. Please, let's not divorce. But I couldn't possibly trust Osaman's words.
Never cheat again? Unbelievable. I'm divorcing you. And I'll be claiming compensation too. Looks like your beloved Carly is getting dumped too, so you two might as well stay together. No, wait, think this over. Absolutely not. I can't live with someone like you any longer.
I grabbed the divorce papers again and pushed them toward Osaman.
There's no way we can rebuild from this. If you understand, agree to the divorce now.
Realizing I was serious, Osaman no longer resisted and agreed to the divorce. Finally, I could get away from this man. And I wouldn't have to see Carly's face anymore. This realization brought a smile to my face. A few days later, Osaman and I were officially divorced. I managed to claim compensation from both Osaman and Carly, which was satisfying. Carly and Raymond officially ended their engagement too. Despite the scandal, neither Osaman nor Carly quit their jobs. I thought they might leave their positions due to the divorce and scandal spreading through their companies. However, it seems they couldn't afford to quit, needing to pay the compensation. In a way, that served them right. Thinking so might mean I have a bad personality too. After the divorce was finalized, I apologized to Raymond for ruining the party. But he kindly said, "No worries. Thank you for letting me know about Carly's affair. It was a big help." A year after divorcing Osaman, I'm living comfortably alone, working a new job in a new city. I'm not sure what Osaman and Carly are up to, but the compensation is being deposited monthly, so they must be managing somehow. It seems I'm better off living alone than with someone. I probably won't marry again. I cherish these happy days and plan to continue enjoying my favorite tea alone. Kids are really at a disadvantage when their parents have low-paying jobs, aren't they? Sandra, a mother of one of my son's teammates, always seemed to harbor an intense hostility towards me. To be honest, I never really liked her. One day, I was invited by her for lunch. Sensing something unpleasant, I decided to take the initiative. "Do you know about my father?" Days later, I showed up at the lunch hosted by Sandra in a luxury car, and her attitude completely changed. I'm Ashley, a 32-year-old office worker. I met my husband George through work. We hit it off and started dating. We're a close-knit family of 3, blessed with our son. He is Noah, 5 years old now. As he grew, he joined a local baseball team, and I found myself constantly busy with work and social commitments. To be honest, I've never been keen on mingling with the other moms from the team, but supporting my son's baseball games naturally led to more interactions. Among these new acquaintances was Sandra. Her child and Noah were good friends, so I tried to get along with her. But Sandra was a bit of a handful. She always dressed in high-end brands, and all she talked about was how elite her husband was. Because of that, she was somewhat ostracized by others. Still, being on the same team meant I couldn't just ignore her. Plus, our sons were friends, so I tried to accept her like everyone else did. One day, as usual, I was at a tea party hosted by Sandra. Calling it a tea party might be a stretch since it was really just a session to listen to her boast. It was never enjoyable. Sandra was usually the one doing all the talking, but that day she was strangely cheerful and even seemed interested in what others had to say. The friends around us were engaging in lively conversations, but I was suspicious. Wondering what was going on, Sandra suddenly gave me a sly smile and turned the conversation to me.
By the way, your husband is George, right? My husband said he saw him at a subsidiary the other day. Is that true?
As I looked puzzled by her question, her smile deepened, and she looked at me as if she was sizing me up.
I can't believe your husband works at a subsidiary. Is there a problem? My husband works hard and is up for promotion.
I countered.
You know, you're always at our tea parties, right? I thought maybe it was taking a toll on your finances. Subsidiary jobs don't pay that well, I guess.
She looked at me with pity, and I couldn't help but feel annoyed. I confidently responded that I worked too and were not struggling. But she just laughed at my reply.
Both spouses working is a sign of poverty, you know. It's sad, having to work because your husband doesn't earn enough.
Her attitude was clearly mocking. I tried to explain that I work because I enjoy it, but she seemed to take it as me being defensive. She continued to insinuate that working couples are poor and that I must struggle to afford luxury brands. As I observed her, it dawned on me why she was in such a good mood. She had probably found something to ridicule me about today. I was genuinely upset. Whatever I said to her was dismissed as bravado, leaving me no room for a comeback. I couldn't understand why she suddenly treated me like an enemy. That day ended unresolved. Later, I was heading to the park with Noah. He was excited about possibly being chosen as the baseball team's ace for the next game. We were about to go to our usual practice spot when we ran into Sandra. Her son was usually a regular in the team, and I assumed it was the same that time. But she seemed downcast today. Curiously, I greeted her and asked, "Is something wrong with your son, Sandra?" Her response was sharp, pointing at my child.
Your kid took my son's position. All his hard work for nothing, beaten by a poor kid.
Seeing her hold her son, I realized why she treated me like an enemy at the tea party. Noah had taken the ace position her son had, and she resented me for it. Needless to say, Noah had also worked hard, and team positions are the coach's decision, not ours. However, she probably couldn't accept it with her high pride.
Hand that regular spot over to my son right now. I have all the money you could want. How much do you need?
Her words infuriated me. It was only natural, considering she was trying to buy Noah's hard-earned regular spot with money. Annoyed, I shot back at her.
We don't need your money. My son earned his regular spot through his own efforts. Besides, even your son wouldn't want a spot that was bought with money.
Her son looked down and nodded slightly at my words. Seeing that, I glared at her with frustration. Clearly, she didn't appreciate my attitude.
Impudent woman. You think you've won just because you're poor?
With those words, she roughly grabbed her son's hand and stormed off. Since that day, we hadn't talked much. It seemed like our friends noticed the change too. Due to the rumors spread by Sandra, everyone sided with her. I started being avoided even by friends I was close to and felt isolated even when cheering for Noah's baseball games. Despite that, I wanted to support him, so I tried to act as usual. Cheering loudly for Noah and trying to remain cheerful, I sometimes felt the stinging gazes from others. Yet, I refused to be intimidated by Sandra's threats and continued to stand my ground. I was aware of the rumors about me, mostly spread by her. In a way, that made me even more determined to maintain a strong stance. Then one day, as I was getting ready to leave after the game, Sandra approached me with some friends.
Hi. You're as stubborn as ever. Anyway, I'm hosting a dinner at my house. I've invited all members of the baseball team, so you're welcome to come if you want.
I frowned at her words. I never expected her to invite me, especially given our bad relationship.
I really want you to come. I don't want to continue like this. It's pitiful to see you standing alone. Your son will eventually realize what's happening. Imagine how he'll react when he knows his mother is suffering because of himself. You understand, don't you?
She kept looking at me with her challenging gaze. I simply replied without averting her eyes, understood.
That's great. And bring your husband too. It's good for him to socialize as well. Besides, you'd feel uneasy coming alone, right? My husband will be there too, so invite yours. I'll send the details and date in the team chat,
said she before turning and leaving. The friends around us looked anxious throughout the exchange. After watching Sandra's retreating figure, I was left with a bitter expression. Honestly, I had a bad feeling. It was clear she was plotting something. Therefore, before she could make her move, I decided to take the initiative. The day of the dinner arrived. George had an urgent work commitment, so he was going to be late. I called Sandra early in the morning to let her know. When she heard about George's emergency work, she laughed mockingly and said, "It's sad when children suffer because their parents have low-paying jobs." Her usual sarcasm, you know? After a while of her usual snide remarks, she hung up. I was upset but continued preparing to head to my parents' house, just a few minutes' walk from ours. Since George took my car for work, I decided to borrow a car from my parents. After getting the car, I headed straight to Sandra's place. Approaching the area, I joined a line of friends also driving there. Sandra was directing friends to a parking lot near her house, which she managed, so parking was hassle-free. When it was my turn, Sandra looked surprised at my car. No wonder, since I wasn't in my usual car but my parents' luxury vehicle.
Ashley! Hey, roll down the window! Why are you in such a luxury car? It's the same model as my family's car. Did you buy it just to compete with me?
Despite her assertive words, she looked shaken. I rolled down the window and greeted her smiling. I had to borrow it from my parents. Sandra, do you know about my father? She scowled at me.
I wouldn't know anything about a poor family.
Then I'll introduce you later, I said, driving into the parking lot as instructed. She stood there, mouth agape, watching me leave. Thank you for the invitation today, I told Sandra after parking, handing her a cake I brought as a gift. On that day, I wasn't in my usual casual attire. I dressed appropriately for her dinner party, including some discreet branded accessories. She bit her lip and confronted me.
Explain yourself. How can someone like you afford high-end brand accessories and cakes from upscale shops?
Her loud voice drew the attention of friends around us. Amidst the gathered attention, I calmly answered her questions. I haven't mentioned it, but I'm the daughter of a film company president. This cake is recommended by my mother for attending your dinner. I chose the clothes myself. Is there a problem? Her mouth fell open again. She remained frozen for a while before finally speaking in a strained voice.
A film company? You mean where my husband works?
Unbelieving, I showed her a family photo with my father, who was also featured on the film company's website, thinking it would convince her. Still, she refused to believe.
That's a lie. It's just a photo you took when you met somewhere, right? I don't believe it. So, you rented a luxury car and wore high-end brand clothes, bringing a cake from a famous store, all because of the harassment, right?
No, I just chose an outfit and a gift suitable for the occasion. I borrowed the car from my parents because my husband had an urgent job.
A poor person like you being the daughter of a president is just a story, not reality. Stop joking. Do you really want to reconcile with me? I invited you here, offering a chance to apologize.
She yelled hysterically, throwing and stomping on the cake I brought as a gift. I was utterly appalled by her behavior, which was far from someone wanting to reconcile. As her shouting echoed through the yard, a man hurried out from the house, probably worried about her. It was her husband, David. When our eyes met, I smiled at him, which seemed to shock him.
What? The president's daughter here.
His surprise prompted Sandra to turn to him sharply. Despite her intimidating demeanor, David politely greeted me.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm David, nice to meet you. What brings you here today? Anything wrong with the president?
Worried, I turned to him and explained, I was invited by Sandra. His reaction was one of sheer astonishment.
Wow, you two are acquaintances, I didn't know that. The world is indeed small. How did you two meet?
Our sons are on the same baseball team. There was a little conflict when my son replaced your son as a regular, but Sandra invited me here today to make amends. Seems I'm not welcome, though. He then turned to Sandra, suspecting something.
Sandra, tell me. The poor person you always talk about is.
She started sweating profusely. Seemingly she had been bad-mouthing me at home too. Realizing that, I narrowed my eyes. She got in panic and started to deny everything, clinging to David.
It's not her. She's the daughter of a film company president. It can't be. We're actually good friends, right?
Ignoring her pleading glance, I remained expressionless. After what she had done, I had no intention of saving her face. As I was about to retort, someone tapped my shoulder. When I looked back, there was my husband, George. Sorry for being late. I finished work earlier than I thought, so I came. Is something wrong? He had a suspicious look on his face. He looked at Sandra and David, and it seemed like he had noticed something as he spoke. Remember me? We talked at work recently.
Of course, you're the upcoming president.
Then, George blushed and said, Not sure yet. He scratched his head. Seeing their exchange, Sandra was speechless with shock. I picked up the trampled cake and handed it back to her. Do you believe me now? Visibly shaken, she tried to appease me with an ingratiating tone.
I had no idea of your status. I'm so sorry for everything.
She pleaded, but I shook my head. Don't worry about it. We were never close friends to begin with. There's no point in pretending now. My response visibly shocked her, prompting David to ask in a low tone. What's that about? He said. Frightened, Sandra looked at me with a pale face. Sandra has been making snide remarks to me for a while now. She even complained when our son earned a regular spot on the team, offering to pay for it, and when I refused, she started harassing me. She invited me today to make amends, but it's fine. We're leaving. I laid out Sandra's actions to David, who then glared at her angrily. After sharing a smile with George, we left the scene. Following the incident at Sandra's house, the harassment stopped. Besides, the story spread among the team mothers, isolating her instead. The other mothers, seeing her downfall, suddenly started cozying up to me. I couldn't bring myself to like them though. Fond of being in a group, Sandra might be struggling, but I had no intention of helping. It was all her doing. Eventually, Sandra left the baseball team as her misdeeds were exposed. That caused David to be furious with her. Her access to money was also reduced. Her misconduct became neighborhood gossip. Although they were some exaggerated, given her character, I couldn't help but wonder if some were true. However, when whispers of relief about her not getting divorced circulated, I felt a pang of sympathy. Time passed, and Noah moved up to elementary school. Sandra's son, apparently attending a private school, meant no future interactions between us. Noah continued to excel in baseball, and George and I worked even harder to ensure he could pursue his passion without any hindrance.